Cool. Okay, so, well, first of all, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming. This is now our 16th seminar of the Cambridge Disaster Research Network. And if you're joining for the first time, I'm Rory. I'm one of the early career postdoc conveners of the network. And the network aims to connect people that are interested in disasters and disaster researchers across the University of Cambridge, but also outside Cambridge and outside academia. Today, we're talking about citizen science and disasters, which has really become a big topic in recent years, but it's also been in development for quite some time. And it has a lot in common with the push towards participation and some of the arguments around the need for bottom-up versus not top-down disaster policy and research. And we're very lucky to have two excellent speakers to talk about citizen science. Our first speaker is Laure Fallu. Laure is a seismo-sociologist who works for the Last Quake project, which is a citizen science project for earthquakes. And I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat. And our second speaker is Sophie Mower, who is the community support manager of Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, which provides OpenStreetMaps for humanitarian response and community-led development in a number of locations. And I'll put the link to that in the chat as well. Sadly, Dr. Anna Hicks, who was on the program, is unwell today and is not able to join us, but she sends her apologies. So the structure is that Laure and Sophie are going to present their work for 10 or 12 minutes or so, and then we're going to have a discussion and Q&A at the end. So please save your questions for the end. So right now, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker. Over to you, Laure.
Okay, let me share my screen. Here we go. Can you see it, everyone? Cool. Yes. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laure Fallu, just as Rory said. So thank you for introducing me. Thank you for inviting me also. So I have a background in sociology, and I now have been working on citizen seismology for the past 5 years. And I will then present some of the main experience that I've been across for the past years. And I really wanted to thank you for the invitation, because we often talk about citizen science and not so often about citizen seismology in respect to disasters. So I think that's a really important part of citizen seismology. So first, I wanted to kind of brainstorm about what we're talking when we're talking about citizen seismology. So of course, there are some actors that are involved, so volunteers, seismology amateurs, so that who are curious about seismology, but also eyewitnesses, so the people who feel earthquakes. And when we talk to citizens, we also need to consider authorities, of course. And with the notion, with the notion of authorities comes the notions of empowerment and democracy that are really important in citizen science, and so in citizen seismology as well. And if we consider more the seismology aspects, of course, there is the science aspect with data collections and seismic networks, for example, that concerns more the scientists. But earthquakes are also hazards, so comes the notion of risk and prevention, crisis response, etc. So we need to also involve disaster managers within such citizen seismology projects. That say, I'm going to present today 3 projects. So the first one is the Last Quake system, which is a citizen-based information system. So that is run by the EMSC where I work. So it's all based on citizens' reactions. So whenever you feel an earthquake, I don't know how many of you have felt an earthquake already, but one of the main questions, what's happening? So people tend to go on social media, on the internet, etc., and they look for information. And so we at the MSc, we have a peak of connection on our tools, so either on social media or on our websites, and we know that there's something that has just happened. But we also know that at that time, only the citizens who felt the earthquake have information because they were there. So we asked them to provide us information, we collect them, and we gather them, we map them, and we complement this data with information that comes from another source, which are seismic networks. So then we complement citizen data with magnitude and location, for example. So this is kind of a positive feedback loop where everyone provide information, we get them, and we provide them to the citizens, so, which are really at the heart of the system. So you have here a screenshot of the app, so where people can leave a comment, share their experience, etc. So it's really based on citizens' reaction. And it's a system that works. So now we have 1 million users around the world. For a 6.4 earthquake in Croatia, we collected 16,000 felt report, for example, and it also works for minor earthquakes. For example, the one magnitude 1.4, we collected 2,000 citizens reports. So that's still something, right? But we wanted to go further with the project, so we wanted to go further through risk reduction. So we provide now safety tips. So you've got the images here so that people know what to do after an earthquake. We have tsunami safety tips. So Rory, if you have a tsunami right now, you can check the app. And we also have a safety check system, for example, which resembles a little bit to what Facebook was doing. And we found out that we need to go further into citizen science and inform more citizens about what seismology can and cannot do, so that they do not believe misinformation. For example, earthquake prediction when they appear. So that's something we're working on right now. Now let me talk about the second case, which is a very specific one. So it happens in Mayotte, which is a small island in the Aegean Ocean, and mysterious earthquakes happened there, and that led citizens towards citizen science. So here's Mayotte, just in the Indian Ocean, so that you know. So what happened in 2018, there were earthquakes in a region where there was usually not much earthquakes. So you can see here a map with felt reports from citizens who let the reports to Let's Quake study. And there was so many earthquakes that people were really stressed, worried, and that was also because there was no information. So there were a lot of earthquakes, unexplained earthquakes, and no information about magnitude, location, etc. So people really started to be afraid and to be kind of suspicious of why there was no information. And actually, several months after, we found out, not we, but scientists found out that the earthquakes were caused by a volcano that was growing under sea. But because there was no information, they turned to a Facebook group that they called Earthquake Support in Mayotte, and which gathered more than 10,000 users. And they started what we could call a citizen seismology experiment, because on this group, whenever they felt an earthquake, they were putting a post, and they were commenting on each other to know who had felt it. They started kind of mapping the earthquakes, making a list, etc. And that they were doing that because there was no other place where they could do so, because due to the lack of sensors, there were no place for information, and authorities were not giving them information either. The problem with this experiment is that there was no seismologist involved, and so some conspiracy theories started. Yet, at the moment, the group still exists, and all conspiracy theorists have disappeared, and the more scientific part stays, and that's still only citizen seismologists that are sharing information about earthquakes and about the situation that is still going on. So they are still feeling earthquake 2 years after. And then I'm going to present a more built-up experiments, which are based on the Serai and Osmos projects, which are in Haiti. So just a bit of context, I don't know if you remember the 2010 devastating earthquakes. So at the time, there was really a lack of seismic sensors, there was a lack of scientific knowledge, and there was a lack of seismic risk culture. So what we did together with Eric Calais and a team of seismologists and sociologists, we used Raspberry Shakes, which are local seismic sensors, to collect seismic data and to engage with the population. And what we wanted to do is to build a seismic networks that was not only composed of sensors, but also of the humans around them. So that's just the use of the term network in the large sense. So we installed 15 seismic sensors at volunteers and houses or offices. We created a dedicated website so that they can see seismic information. We translated the Last Quake app in Creole so that information was available to all people. And we created a WhatsApp group to gather the community and offer technical and scientific support because this is the main communication channel in Haiti. Because it is a socio-seismological experiment, we thought it was really important to study how people reacted to this Raspberry Shake being implemented in their place. So we led some interviews with the Raspberry Shake host, and we found out that, well, first, they were really still, the 2010 earthquake was still kind of traumatizing to a lot of them. But that was really a motivation for them to take part in the project so that it doesn't happen again. They had a really strong interest, pride and curiosity in taking part in the project. They wanted to help science, but also country development and risk reduction. So everything was a part of the project. They really felt empowered also because they kind of were able to palliate the state deficiency because the state was not able to provide any information or to maintain a seismic network. They felt that they had now the opportunity to do what the state couldn't do. However, there's still room for improvement in the project because they need more technical support, scientific support, and educational support so that they can be ambassadors of the project, so that they can explain to their relatives what they're doing and what's the seismic risk around them. Until then, we had not really had an earthquake, and then in August, last August, there was a deadly earthquake in Haiti, so we could sadly experiment the effects of the project. And we found out that, the network we built have helped the community to get information about the earthquakes, and we also, the data from the network has been used by the civil protection in Haiti, which is still something very important. And the WhatsApp group also that we created to exchange with the host was really used for them to share with us information about damages, etc. And they could ask questions about aftershocks. So it was really a place for exchanges, which benefited for, both the scientists and the citizen scientists. So in conclusion, I'm going to be quick. What we see from all these experiments is that citizen seismology has really the power to contribute both to science, education, and to risk reduction. So for a scientist, it really can help collect more data, understand the hazards, but also assess the risk, which is very important. It also helps citizens to better understand this risk and to be aware of it sometimes. It can enhance risk culture through science culture, but also vice versa. So that's kind of interesting to see how they can complement each other. And finally, it can help when it comes to misinformation, because if you better understand the science, then you trust less misinformation when you see them, and you're better able to debunk them. However, there's still a need to educate the citizen seismology, because that's really, I mean, when it comes to citizen science, you need to learn how to do it, to lead projects, how to collaborate with citizens, but also with authorities, and how to make them sustainable, because hazards won't stop. So you need to make sure we're going to be there for a long time. Thank you for your attention, and a special thanks also to all citizen seismologists and volunteers. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Laura. That was fantastic. If you came in late, we're going to save our questions to the end of the talks. So now I'm going to hand over to Sophie.
Thanks, and thanks, Laura. That was awesome, super interesting. Can everybody hear me? Just want to get a quick sound check and a quick visual check as well.
All good here.
Awesome. Okay, fantastic. So I am also going to talk about the earthquake that destroyed the city of Port-au-Prince in Haiti on the 12th of January 2010. As Laura's just mentioned, the earthquake had a magnitude of 7.0 and really did leave Haiti in absolute ruins. And there was this kind of global international response that grew immediately to respond to this. But as the planes from the international responders flew over Haiti, they had nowhere to land, they had nowhere to give the aid, they had no opportunities to be able to actually deliver and coordinate their efforts due to a lack of geospatial information. Here at the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, or HOT as we call ourselves, we did something a little bit different. So here is a map of Haiti on the date of the crisis, so that's the 12th of January 2010. And here is an image of the map 18 days later, after HOT had mobilized a community of around 600 volunteers to map over pre-earthquake satellite imageries of the entire city of Port-au-Prince, to really be able to use that geospatial data effectively, so that when the first aid responders went back in, they really could provide the aid that they were bringing and weren't just kind of in this kind of crazy environment where they didn't know how to respond effectively. Fast forward to 2021, and HOT is an international organization that works towards a world where everyone is counted, map data is accessible and used in decisions that save and improve lives, and that everyone can engage and contribute to the map. And this is where the citizen science component comes in. So we are working with OpenStreetMap to build a free and open map of the world. And in many places that we work, OpenStreetMap is the most accurate and available map source. Now, I want everyone to just get their fingers on their keypads and type in the chat and tell me who's heard of OpenStreetMap, or like raise your hand on the little raise hand icon. Like, how many people have heard of OpenStreetMap? Yeah, okay. So not many, right? So OpenStreetMap is the Wikipedia of maps. It's an open source mapping platform. It's citizen-led. And if you're not using Google Maps, you're probably using OpenStreetMap. So Maps.me, Amazon, even Deliveroo are all using OSM, and anyone, anywhere in the world can contribute to OpenStreetMap to keep the knowledge on there useful, relevant, and up to date. However, right now, there are more than 1 billion people who are not on the map. And of course, those hit hardest by natural disasters, disease outbreaks, etc., are not mapped. So as an organization, we're using citizen science to work together with communities in those areas that are prone to natural disaster, to build a free and open source map of the world. And as we can see in the Port-au-Prince example, maps are crucial in the hours, days and weeks after a disaster, but they are also key in anticipatory action. So helping a community to prepare for the next major disaster or disease outbreak. So we as an organization work in a total of 94 priority countries across the world. We've recently established 4 open mapping hubs. So one in Asia Pacific, which serves around 25 countries, one in Eastern and Southern Africa that serves 23. We're in the process of working towards a Western and Northern Africa open mapping hub and the Latin America and Caribbean open mapping hub. But of course, one of the biggest kind of principles that we're thinking about here is this local first, community centric principle. So we're really interested in data for who, like citizen science for who. Are we developing this stuff for us so that we can create more data, or like are we developing or are we creating and bringing together this data so that the individuals who are actually using it and actually going to benefit from it are in control? So that's kind of one of my first question to everyone in the room today: data for who, citizen science for who. So we kind of work across 3 core themes. That is disaster response, so mapping for humanitarian relief and public health emergencies. We look a lot into disaster risk reduction and preparedness. We do a lot of information management and community profiling. But we do all of this with a community sustainability development process in mind. So all of the stuff that we do, we make sure the local people know how to do it. We're not flying in experts. We're not flying in, surge capacity. We're ensuring that people on the ground can contribute to OSM and build up that map and geospatial data so it's useful for them. And we also have a massive technology component to our work as well. So that is developing, managing analytics, mapping platforms, all of which are open source and free for the communities that we're working with. So we do this in several different ways. So we have kind of whole teams that are dedicated to the humanitarian response component, a team dedicated to partnerships, a newly established team related to data quality, which is my other question that I pose to you all today, which is what is quality data? What does high quality data mean in a citizen science scenario? We have that tech component that I mentioned already. We have the part of the organization that I am responsible for, which is mobilizing funds and capacity building for the individuals on the ground. So I run all of the community services across Asia Pacific and Eastern and Southern Africa. And then we have the other kind of components of network building. So working with platforms such as OpenStreetMap, because we're Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, we're not OpenStreetMap itself. So we're really thinking about not necessarily like what the tech is, but how are people using the tech, which is, again, a really interesting component, and we can chat about that later. That's one I get very excited about, so I'll pause for a moment there. So how do we do this stuff, and what does localized map data look like so that it becomes useful and relevant? So this is very much a generalization, but it's kind of quite a nice visual aid to describe what we're doing with the communities that we're working with. So we start off with, I mean, a lot of the places we're working, there are 0 maps anywhere, anyway. Why would there be things like Google Maps when there's no commercial interest or viability connected to those, you know, to having an individual in rural Tanzania, for example? They don't have a smartphone, we can't sell them anything. Google Maps are not interested in mapping them. So a lot of the parts of the world look like the left column here, level 0. Then we get remote mappers to come in, and we have a huge online community with which we're building. The aim of the end of the next 5 years is 1 million contributors, but we'll see if we get there. But we have a massive amount of online contributors. You can sign on, you can use our tasking manager. So anyone, so Rory from Patagonia, where you're sitting now, you can get on the map and add a square or a box over a satellite imagery using our mapping platform. Then we move over into the local knowledge section, and this really is where the gold dust is. This is where you add village names, neighborhood names, facilities, schools, clinics. That's the really exciting bit. And all of this stuff you can do on OpenStreetMap. Then you have the final layer, which is level 4. Now, this is the bit where even more data can be generated. And again, we're thinking about data for who. And in this space, we can start thinking about how many beds has a hospital got? How many ventilators has a hospital got? Where are they? How do I get to them? Where are the more vulnerable areas in which we're, in which we're working? So that's really where the additional extra knowledge comes in. And we work across 5 main impact areas. I won't go into this into too much detail, but they're just one of those things, aren't they, that you kind of have to say that you do. But like essentially everything feeds into this, and our main concern here is like, how can the individuals that we're working with build the map to better suit their needs, and how can they create a map that they own and not one that's kind of built into predisposed impact areas. But that's probably a discussion for another day. Okay, I know I've only got a couple of moments left, so I won't talk in too much more. But before I do, I just need to find my. There we go. Okay, cool. So let me tell you about a couple of case studies that we've worked on, because we're talking about disaster risk and management today and how citizen science can feed into that. So I want to talk a little bit about the Romani Huria project, which was a 3-year-long project in Tanzania. The need was to make Dar es Salaam a more flood resilient cities. HOT worked with the World Bank, local communities, the now FCDO, which is the former DFID, which is the UK AIDS organisation, and several universities to collect different types of data around drainage, soil, assets, amenities, and around flood, solid waste, sanitation. And then we took all of that data and we created an early warning system for flood simulation, which was a model, and that then in turn fed into some of the maps that we created for communities and city councils to make impact-based and informed decisions around different resilient programs for within Dar es Salaam. And this was part of a kind of larger sub-Saharan African focused program called Open Cities Africa, which essentially pulled together local government, civil society and the private sector to develop information infrastructure that was necessary to meet 21st century urban resilience challenges. So that's what that kind of fed into, and all of that knowledge came together. It's open source, you can access it now, and HOT's kind of main role within that was to ensure data quality, to get individuals bought into and advocating for open data, and working across we did a lot of implementation actually in 4 main cities. That was Accra, Bamako, Kampala and Monrovia. And we can't be in 2021 and not talk about the global pandemic. I want to talk a little bit about how we use citizen science around the disaster management for in some of the countries that we work in around COVID. So we for the COVID-19 response, we activated our online community because of course everything had to be remote. This was something that was quite new to HOT. Historically, we had, really put emphasis on local knowledge, but it's amazing how much local knowledge can be retained. So like I can go out and I know, even from sitting in this tiny little room in a co-working space in the middle of Cambridge, I know, where I grew up, where my school is, what my school's called, how many classrooms there are. I might be able to remember that, but we'll see. We had a lot of folks that added their own local data onto the map. We got 2.6 million buildings onto the map in the first 6 months, including 550,000 kilometers of road, as well as extensive health infrastructure data. So, where are the hospitals? Where are the people? Where are the ventilators? Where are the people? Where are the highest prevalent cases of COVID, and how is that spreading? And we brought a lot of that that data into OpenStreetMap. We also did a lot of community resilience around this stuff as well. We trained lots of people in using open source platforms like HealthSites.io to upload that critical health infrastructure data that was needed for better COVID-19 response locally. Okay, so I've definitely hit time. Apologies for going over by a couple of minutes. So yeah, as Rory mentioned, my name is Sophie Moa. I run the community services across Eastern Southern Africa and Asia Pacific for the global community team here at HOT. You can find my OSM username on there, SE_Moa. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out if you're interested in this space. And we also have a TED Talk. So please go ahead and read that about our work for the next watch that for our work for the next 5 years. And breathe. That was really fast. Apologies, everyone.
Brilliant. That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Sophie. That was really super. So now we're moving on to our